Hi there, I'm Lorene, and at a family dinner, over mashed potatoes and too many smiles, my mother told me my sister would be moving in with me, not asked, told. And that night I smiled back and silently decided to sell my apartment. But what kind of family makes plans for your life like you're not in it? Have you ever felt like your family made choices about you instead of with you? Let me know in the comments. My mother set the table with her usual precision. Silverware exactly aligned, cloth napkins pressed flat, wine glasses that hadn't seen use since last Thanksgiving. The house smelled like rosemary and tension. I noticed it the moment I stepped in. The way Denise was too cheerful, how my dad barely lifted his head from the TV, and how my mom's smile stretched just a bit too wide when she hugged me. I hadn't been home in months. Not out of bitterness, but because I knew what coming back always cost me. I brought wine. It felt polite, expected. I placed it on the counter, and my mother beamed like I'd handed her a medal. Dinner was baked chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes. Every bite was familiar, down to the seasoning. The small talk circled the usual topics. How cold it was already in Milwaukee, whether Dad would put up the Christmas lights this year, Denise's latest job lead. I nodded where appropriate, offered comments when necessary. I kept my distance wrapped in polite silence. And then, just as I reached for another spoonful of potatoes, my mother folded her hands in front of her and said it. "Your sister's going to stay with you for a while. You've got space and she needs somewhere quiet to get back on her feet." It was said so softly I almost missed it, but the fork froze halfway to my mouth. Dad didn't look up. He just added, "She won't be any trouble." Denise kept her eyes on her plate, but the corners of her mouth twitched. No one asked me. There wasn't a question. It was simply announced, as if the decision had been made days ago and they were doing me the courtesy of informing me now. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forced a nod, and smiled. Small, flat. "Okay." A chorus of relief rose from the other side of the table. My mom looked proud. My dad finally met my gaze. Denise reached for the gravy boat like nothing had happened. Maybe to her, it hadn't. Later, as we cleared the table, Denise pulled out her phone to check a message. I caught the screen for a half second. "Told you it'd work. She bought it." She saw me looking. She didn't flinch. She just locked her phone and continued wiping the table. The drive home was quiet. Milwaukee streets were already decorated for the holidays. Lights strung across intersections, wreaths on storefronts, an occasional blow-up snowman wobbling in someone's yard. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I just gripped the steering wheel and replayed the dinner over and over. They never asked. They never have. They just placed me wherever I was most useful and called it love. By the time I got back to my apartment, I felt numb. Not sad, not angry. Just tired in a way that didn't have a cure. I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of water, and sat on the couch without turning on the light. The radiator clicked. The silence grew thicker. I stood up, walked to the drawer in my desk, and pulled out the folder I'd tucked away weeks ago. Inside, signed lease papers, a new address, a new beginning I hadn't told anyone about yet. I placed the folder on the table beside the keys to the apartment everyone thought I still lived in. They think I'll open my door when she knocks. They don't know I've already closed it. The next day, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off a bottle of blood pressure medication my dad had left in my car. It was supposed to be a quick visit, just in and out. No sitting down, no stories, no dinner. I let myself in with the spare key still taped under the porch light, even though I hadn't lived there in almost 15 years. Nothing ever changed in that house, except me. As I walked through the front hallway, I glanced toward the living room like I always did. It was automatic, like muscle memory. My eyes went straight to the wall above the fireplace, and stopped. There was a new frame, larger than the old one, in dark cherry wood. Inside it, a photo. Denise, front and center, laughing in a way that looked a little too rehearsed. My mother was next to her, hand on her shoulder. My father stood stiffly to the side. I wasn't in it. The photo was recent. Everyone looked freshly dressed. It had clearly been taken on purpose. Not a candid, not an accident. It wasn't like they'd cut me out. I'd simply never been there to begin with. I stood there longer than I meant to, long enough for the heat from the nearby vent to start drying the inside of my throat. You like it? My mother asked from behind me. I turned to her. She was wiping her hands on a dish towel, face lit up like she'd just hung a wreath. I nodded. It's nice. What happened to the old one? I asked, pretending the question was casual. Oh, that? She said, shrugging. It was looking a little worn. The colors were faded. This one just felt fresher. I wanted to ask who took the new picture, who framed it, who decided that the only child not in the photo didn't need to be consulted. But I already knew the answers. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd just moved on without needing to remember. I helped set the table because that's what I'd always done. Denise was at the kitchen island, retelling a story I'd heard 3 times before, about a boss who hated her, a job that didn't appreciate her. My mom was laughing, my dad was nodding. I folded napkins in silence. The tablecloth was new, pale green with gold stitching. I ran my fingers over it absent-mindedly, tracing the lines until they disappeared beneath the plates. If I vanished tomorrow, I wondered how long it would take before they'd change the Wi-Fi password and forget to tell me. Dinner wasn't part of the plan, but they asked if I wanted to stay. I said I had errands. I lied. I always lie in that house. The truth doesn't belong there. As I stepped out into the cold, I pulled my coat tighter. The wind cut sharper than expected. Behind me, the house glowed warm through the windows. Inside, laughter echoed. Plates clinked. Someone turned on music. I stood on the sidewalk and watched it for a moment too long. It's funny how something can still feel like home even when it stopped being yours. Mom asked me to help her sort through some old boxes in the basement. Only take a minute, she said, though I knew it wouldn't. Time never moved in that house the way it did elsewhere. It stretched, hung in corners like old dust. The boxes smelled like mildew and paper. I reached past a stack of faded photo albums, brushing against wallpaper that hadn't been changed since I was 13. Yellowed floral patterns with tiny blue buds. One of the buds had a scratch through it, something I'd done with a pencil out of boredom or defiance. I remember Dad scolding me. I don't remember anyone asking why I did it. A tightness crawled up my neck. I kept moving. Inside a torn cardboard box labeled Missisk, I found my old sheet music. Songs I used to practice when I thought I might be good at something. I held one up. Rainbow Connection. My handwriting was small and determined across the margins. Sing soft here, it said. 2nd grade, talent show. I had practiced for weeks in front of my mirror. I wanted to sing, not because I thought I was great, but because I wanted to be seen. That was the difference. The night before, I told Mom. You sure? She said, laughing lightly. That's not really your thing, sweetheart. Denise didn't even sign up, but the next day her name was on the sheet. She wore a glittery sweater and sang a pop song she barely knew the lyrics to. Everyone clapped. I never left the wings of the stage, just stood there, holding my note card like it might shield me from something. We never talked about it again. Upstairs, the doorbell rang. I left the basement and caught the end of Mom's conversation with the neighbor from next door. That one, she said, gesturing vaguely behind her. You know, the quiet one, keeps to herself. That one. She didn't mean it cruelly. That was the worst part. It just was. A reflex, a designation. An identity I never signed up for but wore like hand-me-down shoes. I didn't say anything. Just stepped outside, pretending to answer a call. The air hit cooler than I expected. I walked a few blocks without direction. Leaves crackled under my feet. Somewhere along the way I started cataloging. Birthday cakes that never showed up. Letters addressed to Lorene. News shared last to me. When you stack it all together, it doesn't scream, it just leans. By the time I returned to my apartment, the sun had sunk past the roof lines. I kicked off my shoes, made tea, and sat at the kitchen table without turning on the light. I opened my notebook. On the top line of a clean page, I wrote, "If I disappear, who will notice?" I didn't write anything else. The screen of my phone lit up. A message from Denise. When should I bring my stuff over? She didn't knock, just texted from the curb. Here, can I come up? I watched the message flicker on my screen, then disappeared behind the apartment buzzer, ringing 2 seconds later. No pause, no wait for permission, just entrance. She called it, scoping out the place. I called it what it was, the beginning of someone else's blueprint unfolding in my space. Denise walked in like she already lived there, opened the cabinets, flicked the light switches a few times like she was testing them, ran her hand along my countertop like she was measuring for her things. I stood by the door, holding my mug, still warm. I didn't offer her coffee. She didn't ask. "This place feels cozy," she said. "You've done well for yourself." It sounded like praise, but her tone gave it weight, like she was giving me credit for something she planned to edit. She left after 30 minutes, chattering about logistics and asking 0 questions. When the door closed, I didn't feel relief. I felt vacancy, like something important had been shifted, but I couldn't name what. Later that week, I went to make soup, the kind I always made when the days got shorter, the kind I learned from a coworker named Joy, who used to keep lavender in her desk and always knew when I needed a break. She died 3 years ago suddenly. No family, no warning. The pot she gave me on my last day at that job sat under my stove like a quiet keepsake. But when I opened the cabinet, the lid was gone. Not misplaced. Gone. I checked every shelf, every drawer. Nothing. I texted Denise. "Hey, by chance, did you move the lid to my gray pot?" She replied 10 minutes later. "Oops, might have taken it by accident when I cleaned the sink stuff. Probably left it in my car or tossed it. Just a lid, right? Just a lid." I didn't respond right away. I stared at the screen like maybe the words would shift if I looked long enough. 20 minutes later, another text. "Seriously? It's just a lid, Lorene. Don't be so dramatic." I never texted back. Instead, I wrapped the pot gently in a kitchen towel and slid it into the back corner of the lower cabinet. Not out of use, but out of reach. That pot would never hold soup again. It held something else now. A lesson. A line. It's never the shouting. It's the shrinking. It's the sigh when you say something matters, and the answer that comes back is laughter or silence. The pot wasn't the first thing. They've borrowed my weekends, my bed, my patience. They've broken my rhythms, my voice, my name, cracking them like ceramic. And every time I said, "That was mine," someone said, "It wasn't that big of a deal." That night, I unplugged the lamp she'd fiddled with. Not because it was broken, but because I didn't want its glow near me. I played an old voicemail from Mom while brushing my teeth. One I kept saved, hoping someday it would sound different. She was saying, "She's your sister, Lorene. She's not perfect, but neither are you." She always said that when I asked to be heard. Like fairness was a burden, and love meant keeping quiet. I stood at the sink, toothbrush resting in my hand, listening. They keep breaking pieces of me. One, not a big deal, at a time. It was 10:02 p.m. when my phone lit up. I was folding laundry, the buzz cutting through the hum of the dryer. No name on the screen, just Mom. No greeting when I picked up. "Quick question. You have that second bedroom, right?" The kind of question that wasn't really a question. The kind where the answer had already been chosen for me. I let the silence hang for a few seconds, just long enough for her to think maybe the call had dropped. "Yes," I said. She jumped in too quickly. "Your sister's just going through a rough patch. We thought maybe she could stay with you for a while. Just until things settle." We. Always we. Like I was never supposed to be an individual. Like decisions were made by a collective I was only invited to when something was needed. "You've always been so generous, Lorene," she added, soft as warm milk. I could hear Denise in the background, laughing at something on the TV. She wasn't packing. She wasn't struggling. She was waiting. "Let me think about it," I said. But I didn't need to. I already had. I hung up, dropped the towel into the basket, and stared at the blinking voicemail icon still flashing from earlier. I didn't listen to it. The next morning, a friend sent me a screenshot. Denise had posted 2 bar stools and a bookshelf for sale. "Getting ready for my new place," the caption said. No tag, no name, no address. But we both knew. She hadn't even asked. She never did. I realized then this wasn't a plea. It was a procession, a move already underway. She wasn't moving in. She was moving me out. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall where my vision board hung. "Boundary," one of the sticky notes read. "Not a wall, just a door you get to choose when to open." But my doors were already swinging off the hinges. I remembered something a therapist once told me. Silence can sound like consent, so I wrote a new list. Change the locks, don't answer texts too quickly, start packing again, don't wait for the final straw. I opened my fridge and looked at the soup I'd prepped. The pot looked smaller now, like it didn't belong in this chapter of my life. I closed the door without taking anything out. Later that night, scrolling aimlessly, I landed on Denise's Instagram story. A boomerang of 2 moving boxes stacked by the door. A mug in her hand. The quote in the caption read, "It's not home if I have to ask to be there." I put my phone down. She wasn't just bringing herself into my life, she was packing me out of it. The text came at 8:46 in the morning. I hadn't even poured my coffee yet. "Hey, sweetie, don't forget to bring that casserole dish when you move in. Love you, Denise." I read it once, then again, not because I didn't understand, but because I was waiting for it to hurt less on the second read. It didn't. I didn't reply. I just stared at my phone screen until it dimmed on its own. The message burned into the quiet of my apartment. It wasn't the first time. It wasn't even surprising. It was just another scratch on the surface. Familiar. That day, I did something I hadn't done in a while. I scrolled back, through every message she'd sent me in the last few months. "Sweetie? Honey? You know who I mean." Never my name. Not once. I typed Lorene into the search bar. 0 results. I don't think it was intentional. That was the worst part. Intentional things you could argue. You could fight. You could push back against them. But carelessness? That was harder. It meant you weren't even on the map. Later that night, I opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand and pulled out the birthday card I hadn't thrown away. I don't know why I kept it. Habit, maybe. Or hope. It had flowers on the front. Inside, in looping cursive, "Happy birthday, Denise, so proud of you." The name was scratched out, heavily. Beneath it, in blue pen, someone had written, "Oops, Lorene." The oops stung more than the mistake. I ran my finger over it. The indentation where Lorene was written didn't even match the rest of the handwriting. I don't know if it was my mother's or someone else's. That made it worse somehow. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked over to my computer, opened the router settings, and renamed my home network. It had been Lorene Home for years. I changed it to NA. I removed my name from the mailbox downstairs. I took myself off the RSVP list for Thanksgiving. I didn't make a speech about it, didn't text anyone, didn't post a quote online about boundaries or healing. I just started erasing myself before anyone else could. But then I walked to the fridge. I took a yellow Post-it from the drawer, wrote 5 bold letters in block caps, and stuck it dead center on the silver door. Lorene. No smiley face, no exclamation point, just a name, just mine. If no one else will remember it, I will. The subject line read, "We need to talk." It was the first thing I saw when I rolled over that morning. My body was still tangled in sleep, but my mind sharpened the second I saw her name, Margaret Franklin. My mother didn't email unless it was a recipe link or a forwarded chain letter from 2009. But this had weight. I opened it. The first paragraph was coded in concern. She hoped I was doing well. She noticed I seemed distant. "We all miss you," she wrote, as if I'd been absent from a place that ever truly made room for me. The second paragraph turned colder, a slow shift in tone, carefully disguised. She said she was disappointed by my choices, said she couldn't understand why I'd shut everyone out. That family meant compromise, and mine seemed in short supply. And then the third. "You've always been independent," she wrote, "but independence isn't an excuse for cruelty." Cruelty. I read the line again, and then one more time, just to feel the sting fully. She hadn't called when Denise walked into my apartment like it was hers. She hadn't asked if I felt safe when I changed the locks. She hadn't asked anything, really. But now, because I'd finally said no in a way they couldn't undo, because I'd held my ground in silence, I was being framed as cruel. It wasn't surprising, just clarifying. The email continued, "You're the older daughter. If you don't set the example, who will?" I could almost hear her voice in that line, calm, certain, laced with history. It wasn't about right or wrong, it never was. It was about what I was supposed to carry. They gave Denise softness. They gave me duty. Her chaos was excused. My distance was punished. I started a reply, deleted it, wrote another, deleted that too. Everything I typed either sounded too angry or too clean. None of it held the truth the way I needed it to. So I didn't respond at all. Instead, I called my landlord. "I'm confirming the date to finalize the lock change," I said. He told me it was already set, that everything would be switched by the end of the week. I thanked him, hung up, and exhaled. Later, I walked downstairs to check the mail. Inside the box was another envelope, hand-addressed in my mother's handwriting. I didn't open it. I carried it upstairs, dropped it gently into the trash, and didn't look back. No anger, no flinching. If love is a leash, then maybe silence is mercy. The first thing I noticed was the glass. It was sitting on the wrong side of the sink, upside down, still damp. I hadn't used it. I always let mine air dry on the rack. Then the window in the living room, open just enough to let in the bite of late November. I never left it like that. Not since the wind had once slammed it shut so hard the latch cracked. Nothing was missing, but everything felt touched. I moved to the kitchen, opened the drawer beneath the sink. The small wooden box I kept hidden, where I stored things I didn't want touched, was ajar. I closed it slowly. My hand didn't shake. I didn't panic. I just knew. It didn't take long to find the lease agreement, folded neatly between my tax papers. The line was there in ink, barely faded with time. Spare key issued to Denise Harlow. Temporary assistance, 2 weeks. That was 4 years ago. I had never asked for the key back, and Denise, true to form, had never offered to return it. The door hadn't just been physically open. It had never emotionally closed either. That evening, as I passed the mailboxes on my way in, Mr. Collins, my neighbor from 2 doors down, gave me a nod. "Your sister dropped something off earlier," he said, like it was casual, like it wasn't shattering. "Oh," I asked, feigning calm. "She said she was just bringing over a few things, seemed in a rush." I smiled, thanked him, walked up the stairs slower than usual. I hadn't told anyone Denise was moving in, because she wasn't, but now, apparently, she had started, and she hadn't needed my permission. That's what she meant when she said, "See you soon," with that glint in her voice. She wasn't planning, she was planting her flag. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I changed the locks. I carried a cardboard box into the apartment, packed every single item that didn't belong to me. Her scarf, her mug, her tote bag folded under the hallway bench. I labeled the box with black marker. "Not yours." The irony didn't escape me. I carried it down to the building lobby and placed it on the donation shelf. It wasn't charity. It was closure. Inside, I left a note. "You came in without knocking. This is me closing the door." Then I went home, sat on the couch. The new lock clicked behind me with a satisfying finality. I didn't light a candle. I didn't turn on music. I just sat. Let the stillness be mine again. Hours later, my phone buzzed. One new message from Denise. "Where are my things?" I stared at the screen. I didn't take anything from her. I just stopped letting her take from me. It was raining the day I collapsed. I had pushed myself too far, staying late for a coworker's shift, skipping meals because deadlines kept inching closer. The floor came up to meet me before I could reach the break room. I woke up in a hospital bed, IV in my arm, fluorescent lights humming above me. No one came. Not my mother, not Denise, not even a text asking if I was okay. A nurse named Marlene held my hand. She smelled like lavender and wore her exhaustion like armor. She told me quietly, "You're not alone, but sometimes you have to save yourself anyway." I never forgot her. I remember checking my phone that night, battery full, inbox empty, not even a missed call. When I mentioned it to my mother later, her voice was clipped. "We didn't want to crowd you. You like your space." I didn't argue. Some wounds don't bleed loud enough to be acknowledged. Last week, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. Final notice. A leftover medical bill from that hospital visit. One I thought had been resolved. 2 years ago, Mom had said, "Send it to me. We'll help. That's what family does." I believed her. I tore up my copy of the invoice back then. Told myself it would be handled. That just this once I wouldn't have to do it alone. But I should have known better. I always should have known better. I paid the bill in full that afternoon. Quietly, no ceremony, just my name, my card, and my signature. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt like closing a tab no one else remembered they opened. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside, I placed the family photo, the one they hung in their living room without me. I tucked it in gently, along with a copy of my new apartment key. Not the real one, just a blank duplicate with no grooves. A symbol, an invitation that wasn't. I wrote a note on a small card. If you ever want to come by, you'll need to knock, and I might not be home. I mailed it the next morning, not out of spite, but out of clarity. Some things you return not because you owe them, but because you refuse to carry them anymore. Back in my apartment, I lit a candle. The room was still, not empty, just peacefully mine. I set the receipt from the medical payment beside the flame, watched the numbers blur under soft light. I used to think healing had to be loud, that it had to look like slamming doors, dramatic exits, final words yelled in kitchens. But now I know, healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stops asking for anyone else to notice. Maybe that's the hardest part, realizing that sometimes the people you love the most will expect you to give the most, even when you have nothing left. But setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. Saying no doesn't make you broken. It makes you whole. If you've ever been the one holding your family together while quietly falling apart, I hope this story reminded you that it's okay to walk away from what hurts, even if it has your last name on it. Have you ever had to choose peace over pleasing others? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a 1 in the comments if this hit close to home, or let me know where you're watching from. And if this story made you feel seen, even just a little, don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next story. You deserve to feel heard, always.